Welcome to the Young Crones Cafe, where you can get a magic brew full of all sorts of information, both witchy and practical.
Grab a cup of coffee and join us. I'm Elizabeth, a wordsmith.
And I'm Dave, a modern-day sage.
We are going to talk about various witchcraft and life topics from a slightly more mature perspective, at least most of the time.
Thanks for joining us.
Today's metaphysical kernel of thought is concept of crafting. Witchcraft contains the word craft itself, and to craft is to make something. Many people connect this word to arts and crafts or other hobbies that are not necessarily important or something you do when you have some spare time. We are choosing to reclaim it as a way to describe what we do. The guilds of old were where one went for training in a particular art. First, one became an apprentice and began learning the basics of how to create something special. After much work and study, you moved up to the rank of journeyman and were often sent out into the world to create works as practice. Finally, you might be elevated to full membership in the guild itself when you had mastered almost all the aspects of this type of creation. This was a lifelong process, and many never advanced to this final level. To us, crafting is what we are doing in our current spiritual practices. We craft rituals and spells and liturgy for the path itself, and to create our great work, which is personal transformation into the best possible individuals we can become. We are journeymen because we are constantly working on our craft, refining the processes we learn and use for spiritual growth and change. We do not consider ourselves masters at our craft because that would require a perfection beyond our human limitations. Hey, Dave.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you today?
Oh, better, little physical strides, which are making me feel more like a person. Anything else is TMI for a podcast or a listener out there to hear. But,
Well, as a person who has spent some time in my life before in a cast or in a sling or on crutches, I understand those days when you get to be able to reach places that you couldn't reach before. And those are minor victories in the healing process. I think that's what you're talking about.
Some days it feels like a major one, just,
Yeah. For me, it's...
Well, but today it is.
For me, with shoulder injuries, it's if I can reach my arms above my head in the shower and wash my hair, it's a good day.
There you go, exactly.
And today we are talking about
the concept of crafting.
Crafting, okay.
Yeah, when you think about it, we have witchcraft, spellcraft, ritual craft, blah, 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 blah. Lots of people bandy that word around. And in general, if you look up a meaning, it means to make something.
Right. I think nowadays, especially with such a huge crafting boom in our Western culture, and craft stores and craft fairs and craft parties, I think sometimes our modern culture tends to see craft as a noun.
Yes.
And what we're talking about here is craft as a verb, crafting. Yes. Building something, musician, as an example. And you talk about in here the concept of apprentice and journeyman and master and so on. This has been this way for a long time, where some of our names even, I'm sorry, didn't mean to stumble there, but some of our names even, like Chandler, I just happened to be seeing a news item about Mr. Perry. Chandler originally was the candle maker for your village, and Smith was the guy who knew how to bend hot metal. And so even our culture recognizes that crafting or taking up a craft is an act of a lifelong dedication of doing something for some purpose.
And to get better at a skill.
Yep.
And witchcraft, if nothing else, is a skill at times.
Sure.
It requires certain skills and a certain knowledge base, which is where the apprentice piece comes in if you're going to be a witch.
I would dare to say, though, that it's a combination of that and art.
I would agree. But if we're taking it back to the idea of chandler and smithing and so on, it was considered an art back then.
Sure, absolutely.
It was an art, and it meant something if you were moved from apprentice to journeyman. In that respect, it meant that you had learned enough about creation to warrant that title.
Sure. I see that echoes of that still in modern culture in a lot of cases with like unions, where in a union you're an apprentice and then a journey and then a journeyman and then a master or what have you. You know, the same thing was true 1,000 years ago when there were guilds. And there was the Armorers Guild, and there was the Scribes Guild, and there was the Chandlers Guild. And those members of that guild board were those people that had, quote unquote, mastered their craft.
Yes.
For us, we just
know.
I'm sorry?
They were also the ones who determined what you had to know.
I hadn't thought about that aspect, but yep, you're right.
And they selected their apprentices in that respect.
Sure. You know, and established a curriculum, and you know, even modern unions, you know, the carpenters union or the electrical workers union. That's what I segued into that for, is because I remember the day that I was handed my journeyman's certificate, and that was a huge big deal for me. In my case, I had spent 11 years both in the Navy and then in the shipyard, mastering or learning or studying my craft. And now they wanted to put me out in the world on my quote unquote journey so that I could go make my art.
Yes.
For many, many, many years until I became a master of the art.
Oh, yeah. My grandson, bringing up modern unions, has applied to be an apprentice in the stonemasons union.
Yep.
And they give you a specific, there's a 4-year specific apprenticeship in which time you are expected, they're going to pay him, but there is expected to learn certain curriculums each year.
Absolutely. Yep.
A journeyman, which it requires a whole lot more study, you know. And I'm thinking, he's building chimneys and laying bricks. It doesn't seem that complicated from the outside looking in. But when you think about it, it's almost like the medieval guilds, where if you were a member of a particular guild, you did not share your knowledge with outsiders.
No, that was a collective of intellectual property that was shared with the guild.
Exactly. So in this case, he's learning almost like the secrets of the guild in that respect. I find it interesting. But to bring it back around to how we look at it, as on the path, when you first discover witchcraft, or it discovers you, I think that's kind of how that works sometimes, you have to get a certain basic knowledge of all kinds of things. And
I think the word that most people identify with that nowadays would be novice or newbie. Newbie.
Yeah. Well, and there are people who call them baby witches, which I find kind of patronizing, but yeah, a newcomer more than anything else. A new seeker, how's that?
Someone who has not made the decision to commit themselves to the apprenticeship and the years of work and dedication that it's going to take, right?
Yeah, and then if you become an apprentice, you've made that commitment, for want of a better word, and then you open yourself up to all sorts of different kinds of studies. And if you're working with a specific group or group of people for whatever reason, there may be certain ways they do things that you learn, or certain, for want of a better word, curriculum they want you to cover.
Sure. Here in my local area, I know there's a fairly large and organized, somewhat Victorian coven, and they literally have a suggested reading list. And there's, I think they have a list of 13 steps that they do as an initiate to become an apprentice and so on. So there's certainly carryover in the more organized more coven-centric kind of witch community.
Yes, and we use those words because we are not a coven. We are a spiritual path, and I don't think member wise, we never have looked for people to come practice with us per se. We focus more on the idea behind it. So we're not telling you to go out and find a coven here if you want to be a witch or have made that commitment to be a witch. You can study on your own. And believe
Yep.
me, if you listen to that internal spark, it'll push you in the directions you need at the moment.
I would call myself a journeyman pagan spiritualist.
Yeah.
I've never really been a joiner or a belonger in those kind of structured atmospheres for me, because what it does is it stirs up echoes of organized religion. So for me, keeping it as solitary or at least internally centric as I can is just what's comfortable for me. But after doing that for 15, 20, 30 years, you become a journeyman in whatever it is that you are practicing. And you sort of rededicate that every single morning.
I think so. And for me, when I first got into witchcraft, I needed that structure because I didn't know anything. And I was on the outskirts of a group, for want of a better word, and learning all kinds of things, which was great, and it was allowed to participate enough that I got the taste for ritual. I think it's the best way to describe that.
Sure, yep.
Their particular, we'll keep it nice, their particular flavor didn't mesh with some of the things I thought. And I found like-minded people over the years and ended up with Sue. And we really kind of figured out that, we're basically solitaries who like get together to celebrate certain shit.
Yep.
And then we'll go on our merry way. And that does not mean we are any less witches or any less connected to people spiritually.
Well, 20 years and half a dozen books later, obviously you had a great idea.
I like to think so. And that's why we're sitting here trying to share it with the world as it were in a podcast. And that is a continual practice of crafting because, yes, we've written stuff and yes, we've done stuff. And the basics are out there now. We're getting ready to publish the last book of 5 that kind of cements everything Sue and I kind of glommed onto from somewhere in the universe.
Sure. Essentially, the 4-book set would be your grimoire or your book of shadows or book of the seen and unseen, just to give a little lead to next episode.
Yeah, exactly, which is a whole other fun topic. But the whole idea is, as a journeyman person, you're going out and practicing and you learn new stuff and you incorporate it and things change.
Sure.
And how you do things change. And then it's a continual process. It's not like you create this and you stop.
Right. And Steve Vai had an interesting quote in one of the interviews. He's a virtuoso. I would call him a master of his craft and his instrument on the electric guitar. And he learned as a student from another great guitarist. And it was fascinating to me because it was an interview with the two of them.
Oh, wow.
And what he said was, 20 years later, if you are still playing guitar like your guitar teacher taught you how to play, you have not learned to play guitar.
Makes perfect sense.
You know what I mean? If 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, you are still doing your ritual exactly the same as you did, if you're in tradition, that's fine. But from my point of view, you haven't built any you into this, and so it hasn't become your craft.
Or your tradition.
Sure, absolutely. What he's saying is, add your own flair and build upon what you have learned or been taught in a curriculum. Have your own style, have your own sound, walk your own path.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're saying here in this writing more than anything else is you have to figure it out. And being a journeyman is pretty awesome most of the time. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. And I love when I visit. It's interesting that that comes up, but when I visit other groups for a Sabbat ritual or something like that, I shy away from playing the role of journeyman in other people's circles. I tend to prefer to be the acolyte or the apprentice when I am visiting someone's sacred. You know what I
but
mean?
yeah, because we don't have the right to come in and say, "Oh, you're not doing it right because we do it this way."
Well, no,
You think
what I'm saying is I've been part of Circle and had somebody say, well, you've been doing this for years, so you should probably come up here and speak and this and that. No, that's not what my journey is about. What my journey is visiting and learning how it is that you do things.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons I love listening to other witches podcasts, because they will interview people or talk about how they do stuff.
Yep.
And sometimes it just like, no, that's not going to be something I would ever think of doing. But
Sure.
it spark an idea in my head. Well, if I don't do it this way, how would I do it? Or how do I do it? And does it work for me still? Or do I need to, maybe the reason it rubs me the wrong way is it something I should be doing, kind of thing.
Sure.
And that's where I find the greatest joy in listening to some of these people talk, in between all the comedy and the banter, and they want to share with other people what they do to spark those ideas, I think, a lot of the time. Just
Well,
like,
absolutely. In a way, that's our form of congregation.
or journeymen meeting each other on the road.
Sure. A guild meeting.
A guild meeting, in essence, yeah. Okay.
Well, actually, when you talk about two journeymen meeting on the road, from my experience, that usually happens in a tavern, not at a guild meeting. But
Well, yeah, but that was what I meant. Those just, everyday conversation, or over a cup of coffee, if that's your bent.
or a tankard. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, well, yes, but you know what I'm saying.
Hey, I'm just taking this whole guild thing and running with it.
I love it.
It seems to be I even broke down,
Yeah.
a newbie or a novice would be someone who was looking into taking formal training on a topic.
Yeah.
A bachelor would be an apprentice. Okay, you've learned the basics, and we can trust that you're probably not going to hurt yourself or the person to either side of you. So
Or below.
now you can start practicing by working with the journeyman.
Yes.
And the journeyman is a master's degree.
Yeah.
Even the name doesn't align, because we tend to see the master as what modern day would be a doctor is a master of their craft.
I agree.
And even then, they're still practicing, but they're able to be part of the guild and, like you were saying, establish the curriculum for the apprentices that learn after them.
Yeah, I think so. And if it and to take the analogy further, if they don't update the curriculum periodically, A, they're not going to attract apprentices anymore, but B, the big guild will become irrelevant. It'd be useless.
Well, and even myself in my circumstance, in the mundane world, is I got away from tech for 3 or 4 years because I was taking care of Susie and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so now I'm taking a handful of online certification courses right now, because I know the best thing that I will be able to represent myself to a potential employer as a journeyman is, here's some updated credentials that I've gotten over the last few weeks to demonstrate that I have tried to get myself up to date and refreshed and learned the new technologies and the new ways of describing things. So yes, in fact, I am updated on that curriculum.
And you have taken personal initiative, which also looks good with
Sure.
Just to carry it one step further, and as a journeyman, we're required to do that, I think.
Yep.
We can get too settled in familiarity with our practice.
Well, and especially, when I was a private pilot, you have to recertify fairly frequently, and you have to take medical exams and whatnot, because you're going to be responsible for other people's lives.
Yes, I think so. And who are we to say, and not to sound selfish, but our individual lives are just as important. And we forget that sometimes. So maybe part of being a journeyman is taking care of ourselves and saying, yes, our spirituality is valuable.
Are,
And that's part of that.
am I fulfilling my spiritual needs as I am trained to do?
Yes.
So then self-care is actually part of the whole process of crafting, is because you are crafting a new you anytime you are crafting anything else.
Exactly. You and I were talking earlier about sitting on that leading edge of creation, and just by being in that exhilarating spot, you are generating a new you in that respect all the time, because you're exposed to that creative energy and that effortless flow that they talk about sometimes.
Sure.
Sweet spot where it's all working. You know.
And it appears, or its sensation is that of effortlessness. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of being a journeyman, is finding yourself better able to, I don't know, find that effortless spot more easily,
Access it more easily. Yep.
access it more easily, and stay in it longer.
I say it that way only because I recently I've been stepping back up on some of my meditation practices, and I believe that space, or for me, I need to believe that space is always there. It's just a matter of me accessing it.
Oh yeah, please. This is the leading edge of creation from the divine of the universe, who is always creating. So it's always there, is my personal belief. And like you said, we need to find the spot within ourselves that allows us to slip into that flow.
Yep.
And
And some days it's easy, and some days it's not easy, and that's part of what it is to be a journeyman in this craft.
I think so. I do. That
Journey person, I should say, but
I know, but semantics. Okay, some stuff. Journeyman just rolls.
I'm always up for semantics.
No, but when you think about it, journeyman just rolls better off the tongue than journey person.
Sure.
And there's some history. I am all for words like mail delivery person or server instead of waitress, and so on and so forth. Some words, though, have meaning deeper than semantics and changing them to sound politically correct. Like journeyman.
Sure.
I'm a journeyman. I am not a man the last time I looked in the shower, but I consider myself a journeyman. But there's a history to the word that has weight to it.
I so adore podcasting with you. I do, because every once in a while you'll do that to me, and now I'm trying to get rid of the picture of you in a shower with your arm in a sling.
Yeah, but you see you get the point.
Oh, absolutely.
Anatomy has nothing to do with certain words.
Right.
And we need to get past that whole hot button. Oh my God, it's not politically correct because it's not gender neutral sometimes.
Well, get a step up above the gender neutral, and just as a blanket statement, we seem to be right now as a culture pretty over obsessed with the minutia of verbiage.
Thank you.
I mean, it could be worse. We could be speaking Latin, but I don't remember how.
Oh God, I don't either. Go there. Okay, let's just draw a curtain over that thought. But you get the point. I mean, some words matter. I agree. How and I think it's more how we view people as opposed to being gender neutrally correct in the words we use. How about if we treat that server with decent respect because they're running around bringing you food?
It was a fun experiment. Just a funny anecdote that I tried about a week of just using the word human.
Yeah.
Be nice to this human, or people thought I was weird.
We're not used to it.
Yeah. But it was interesting when people said, why did you call me a human?
Because you are.
Because that is what you are, and anything more descriptive could be offensive to you. I don't want to call you a he or a she or a they. You are a human, and I recognize that you are a human being, and it's actually a compliment when I call you that. But boy, did some people, especially from my own generation, looked at me like, "Oh yeah, okay, here's Mr.
One of those.
Yep.
And when you think about it, because humans tend to categorize everything. It's just a function of our brains.
Yeah.
You're suddenly not categorizing correctly, and they're trying to make sure you're not having a stroke because
I don't know. I could try another. I could try another week with person. That might be fun. Anyway, back to we're way off topic.
Oh, that's okay. We go down the occasional rabbit hole.
Hey, that's part of the fun of it. I just want to make sure we covered the bases for that one person out there that might actually be following us through the book and says, well, you didn't talk about this paragraph, so I'm just checking,
I think we covered it all.
Finally, you might be elevated to full membership in the guild itself. I'm only going to call that phrase out because it would be a closing thought for me to say, elevate yourself to full membership.
I think so, in that respect.
Understand that, yep, you're here, you're listening to this, you're learning just like the rest of us, and you are a journey person or a journey human in your own spirituality.
Yes. And I worry about people who call themselves masters in any religion or whatever. Therein lies a cult,
Sure.
And it was never one master in a medieval. It was a collective. There was always more than one.
Right.
It wasn't like there was one person who was in charge. It was like almost like a board.
Even Gandalf and Merlin belonged to guilds.
Yeah, see what I'm saying? I thank you. That's a perfect way to say that.
Yep.
There was no one person in charge. So if you're out there and you're new or not so new, and you run into somebody who says, I'm the master of something, unless they're like a 10th degree karate belt, and then they're entitled to say they have mastered karate.
Sure.
I might be very cautious about what they want me to do or say or join.
Sure.
Okay. So I think that's a good spot to end that one before we go down another rabbit hole and start talking about old Bruce Lee movies or something. So with that being said,
you knew where I was going, didn't you?
I did. I could see it in your eyes.
There can be only one.
Yes. May you find mirth and reverie in all things today, and especially in this episode. While we've been having discussions around what we call our metaphysical kernels of thought, which are the whys that form the basics of our beliefs on the path, we recently realized that we could also share about our practices as well. These are the hows and whats that we, as practitioners on the path, actually do in our own lives. So we're calling this new segment Practices of the Path. This segment will be about everything from the various tools that we work with, as well as those we don't and why, to the solar and lunar cycles, herbs we use, crystals and stones that we work with, candles, incenses, oh my, and anything else we come up with that can give an understanding of what we personally do with our magical practices. Hey Dave, how's it going?
I'm well. How are you, Elizabeth?
Okay. This is our section where we can loosely term it the practices of the craft, which is where we talk about what we do, how we do it, and why we do it.
What I do when I do what I do. Yeah.
Dum-dum-ching.
And we're doing incense.
Yes, we are. It seemed appropriate to move from candles to incense, because if you're talking about stuff that seems to regularly show up on altars and everywhere else, those two kind of go hand in hand, don't they?
Absolutely. In fact, it's pretty rare for me anymore to do any sort of magic or observance or anything like that without either a candle burning or some incense going or both.
Yeah.
They just happen to be perfect correspondences for me for fire and air anyway. So, I mean, I have a little cone of incense that probably would not burn anymore because I'd carried it around with me for 7 or 8 years in a little spell kit, and it is my representative for air. So, everybody has their own correspondences and whatnot, but there's always incense or candles going on when I'm trying to be spiritual.
Oh, sure. Same thing for those of us on the path. And we have tried our hand over the years and have come up with our own blends that we use for, solstices or equinoxes and so on and so forth. And I think everybody tries, hopefully, if you enjoy it, tries their hand at making it at some point. We're not talking about making it more than anything else. But if you're going to make your own, one caveat. Anytime you have something new, even if it smells wonderful, try burning it and burn it outdoors somewhere first, because you never know. Something that really smells good initially may smell horrible when you burn it.
Right.
Yeah.
Think of the smell of burnt hair and whether or not you would want incense out of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to sort of stop or sidetrack us a little bit, only because my experience has been, you just mentioned making incense.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience has been that a lot of people, when they hear that, they think of rolling sticky sticks in ground stuff.
Yeah.
I want to, during this little segment, give my little pitch or my little spiel or whatever you want to call it on why I so much like using actual resin and herb incense that I've ground myself over charcoal.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
A lot of people haven't tried charcoal yet, and it's something that, in fact, I'm going to put it on the list, and I will do a monograph on all of the different methodologies and ways that charcoal can be used
Mm-hmm.
for
And-
incense.
And please let people know too. When you're talking about charcoal right now, you're talking about those nice little round things of charcoal, not the briquettes that you burn in your barbecue.
Right.
Because there's a big difference.
In fact, once we get these things onto YouTube, when I go back through and do the edits, I'll put a link to a couple of common brands that we're used to seeing. But anyway, the reason that I wanted to mention that is because a lot of people aren't aware. A lot of people are aware that there are resins that can be burned on a burner or on charcoal. There are oils and there are herbs.
Yep.
But what isn't obvious to most people is what you and Susie and I have always done, and that's putting a bunch of a resin with a bunch of a herb or whatever into a mortar and pestle process and grinding it all up and blending it until you have somewhat a homogeneous mix and making different combinations. I was fortunate enough to be able to inherit your recipe book that you and Susie used. So now as I run out of, say, for example, solstice incense that I used up the last year, I can go into the path works and be able to recreate the proportions and grind that up and make it myself. So one of the reasons that I strongly recommend everybody try out charcoal burning is because, like I say, you can make mixes and matches. A lot of times when I grind something up just sort of on the fly, if it's something that I like, when I'm done, I'll make a little more or whatever in the mortar or pestle. And vast majority of the other people listening have some form of prescriptions that they get. An old prescription bottle is the perfect thing to store. So now I've got about 20 of them lined up along my shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Old prescription bottles work great because they're airtight enough to keep everything fresh and keep everything from dissipating.
Yes.
The other part that I was going to bring up beyond what you can use on charcoal is the fact that for me, it's a progression.
Yeah.
So I like the charcoal, and in my own habit, just to kind of give people an idea, generally I will, once the charcoal is ready, I will start burning with white copal.
Mm-hmm.
White copal for me originally seemed to open up, enhance my perception of auras and magical things. So I liked to use it at the beginning of my rituals because it put me in that state of mind.
That makes perfect sense.
And then oftentimes during the ritual or the working that I have, right on top of that copal that's probably just about done smoking on the charcoal, put something different. And so during the working, I might have some sage or some lavender or something that I've ground up because I want a very bright, heady, quick, potent scent. And I use that to highlight or accent moments or transitions in my ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And then I almost always close my rituals out with a few shavings of Palo Santo wood that I'll put on top of the whole mess. And so now I've been doing it long enough that not only does Palo Santo, to me, when someone's burning at their home, when I walk in, the first thing I think is, ooh, I just missed ritual. But the other thing is, at least, oh God, I've got to say 5 or 6 times a month,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be up in the living room, which has a sacred end to it, where I do some of my work, and I'll light an incense or a light of charcoal because I plan on using this incense, then this incense, then this incense to take myself on a bit of a progression.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been doing this long enough that a lot of times I'll light that charcoal and I'll walk away. And an hour later, I'll realize that there's a charcoal burned out that I lit. And what I learned from that is the scent of the warming charcoal itself is always the first in the sequence of what my body is used to.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything that follows that, usually I am in a somewhat calm, perceptive, balanced sort of space. And then Palo Santo sort of brings me out of it and back to the world. So at this point now, there are days when I'll light the charcoal and hope that I can catch it before it goes out to put a little Palo Santo on it. And all I really needed is to know that I had lit a charcoal and made that little physical moment of, okay, I'm going to pay attention to my spiritual side while I'm working on whatever mundane. And so I laugh around my house that charcoal is actually an incense flavor because there are times when I burn it just for that scent.
Well, that makes perfect sense. When you think about it, neurologists and everything say our scent memory, SCENT, is the most long-lasting in our lives.
Well, and it provides real visceral, like childhood
Oh yeah,
images
exactly.
and everything else, because it hooks right into our lizard brain from before we grew eyes.
Well, and the other part is too, they've done research with people with like Alzheimer's who have reached like end stage Alzheimer's,
Okay.
and they still respond to certain scents.
That would make sense.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yep.
scent is important, and yes, it's a mundane side of it, but it enhances the spiritual simply because we have that sensation of remembering, as you put it.
Sure.
The charcoal, we set ourselves up. And the thing is with incense, it can be used for all sorts of purposes. I mean, it's been used historically for thousands of years and worldwide.
Yep.
In
fact, I saw a fascinating documentary here a few weeks ago about it's a bunch of people on a couple of tribes of people that I believe were on the east coast of Africa. Along in one of those regions, there are families who have tended the same plots of land with the same grove of frankincense trees for 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years.
Yeah.
And one of the most fascinating things about it was watching how they do it, because they actually go up to a particular tree and they perform a form of ritual or a form of blessing. They're having a conversation with this tree, just like, say, for example, a Native American would have that moment of conversation before they let the bow go with their prey animal or what have you.
Yeah.
So they take a moment with the tree and then they slice a little star in the side of it. and they'll come back a few months later, and that scar will have just sort of bled out all of this resin, and that's the raw material that ends up at the end of whatever processing it goes through. That's what ends up with us.
Yeah.
Or as users. And that's one of the reasons that I like to, especially frankincense and copal and some of those, that I know these are resins that came right out of a tree.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer those over others just because I can imagine in my head that there's less processing. This is closer to what it was when it came out of the tree.
And I have to laugh because you keep mentioning white copal. And Sue and I settled on that one as our resin of choice, okay, if you want to put it that way, on the path, because it comes from our hemisphere, at least, our side of the planet.
Okay.
South American,
Yep.
But it's a whole lot closer than, say, frankincense and myrrh, which is over there, Mediterranean, Middle East.
East Africa, yep.
And it's much, not for nothing, it's not like in New York State we have anything local per se, other than pine.
I was just thinking, I burned pine resin and even used it ground up in some of my incense blends. So pinyon is definitely a good fragrance.
Oh, I know, but you're also talking to a woman who's allergic to pine. So we kind of settled on copal.
Okay.
I like to participate in the experience of ritual and not have to leave because I'm sneezing so badly that I can't pay attention, just.
I can remember a discussion with my grandmother when I was about 8, because one day I was sneezing so much in church and I kept telling her that I was allergic to those pews.
Same idea. Yeah, that works to me. But you were talking about, 5,000 plus years tending the same tree. Humans have used sweeter smelling stuff to get rid of disagreeable odors and chasing away demons for at least that long.
Or conjuring up spirits or talking to ancestors. I mean, there's something very primitive of us watching the smells come off of a fire, so to speak.
Yeah, it's the same idea. And incenses are great. You can use them as filler, obviously, because you were talking about, putting different combinations of things together.
Mm-hmm.
There are thousands and thousands of lists out there, correspondences for herbs that you can use when you're creating an incense or to work with a certain energy, which is where the path tends to concentrate on particular incenses, because we have, incenses for, like we said, winter solstice or to Candlemas times and times.
I will reiterate strongly something that Elizabeth said before, and that is, if you're going to try something a little bit out of the box or a little bit different with your incense, you always try it in a fire pit in your backyard or at least someplace outdoor.
Ventilated spaces.
Funny story, but I went through a conservation kick years ago, and I saved a bunch of seeds from a particular hemp product that I used in ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And I saved these seeds, and I told to my friends that I was saving them for a particular purpose. And so I got all of these people's energies together, and I got an entire coffee can full, and I ran them through a grinder, and then I mortared and pestled them, and I rolled them in some honey sticks. And I spent 7 to 10 years somewhere gathering and about a year drying and processing all of this to find out that pot seed incense smells exactly like burning pot seeds. And no, you don't want that in your home.
No, but you could also get some stuff that really smells horrible. I can't remember the one herb that Sue and I and a guy, Jeremy, we used to practice before we got, no, not even before we started the beginnings of the path, kind of.
Yep.
And we tried out different things. And you would think, and unfortunately, we're kind of in a closed-in space because it was winter. So if you're going to try stuff, you need to be in a well-ventilated space where you can have plenty of air to blow it away. Whatever this was, it smelled delicious until you set it on fire.
Yep.
And then, my God, you would have thought we killed somebody, you know.
Right.
So yes, that is important. And it's like I said, you and do not feel obligated because we love making incense and creating things and so on, that you have to do it too.
Oh, but why not try something different? Absolutely.
Exactly. But if you don't have the time or the energy or the patience, or you live with young children who, will get into anything, sometimes you have to wait. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with our own incense.
Well, that's probably something else that I would mention just from a safety point of view too is, very rarely do I leave a room where incense is lit anyway. Generally, I'm a little on the conservative side when it comes to fire in my home. So
Mine too.
I don't feel as uncomfortable burning incense or candles around children because I can be there to monitor them. With me, it's pets. I've had cats who like to play with candle flame, and you end up with burnt cat paws and wax all over the table. And, not a fun ritual.
No, and young children also tend to put stuff in their mouth. And
Right.
what I'm thinking is you're talking about your nice prescription bottles, which hopefully you have up out of the way. A lot of people recycle jars.
Yep.
Kids can open jars, So if you
Right.
have those in your life, same with laundry pods or anything else, like household cleaning products, anything they can get into, little kids, put it up out of reach. Keep your incenses high, keep the herbs high, keep your candles out the way,
Don't store your resins in the sun.
No, don't store your resins in the sun.
All right.
Basic stuff like that. But we tend to just wrap it up on the path. We tend to use incense on our altar. We tend to match it up to the season of the year or the type of ritual we're doing. And we do create our own. And we also use it in spell work. But that tends to be more of an individual thing. But enjoy it. That's the big part about incense. Pick stuff that you're not allergic to and burn away.
Well, and as I mentioned, once you have some favorites, when you start to use something consistently, it can become a part of your practice.
Yeah, and it does, because your brain recognizes that, it's time for ritual.
Right. All right.
So, with that being said, may you find mirth and reverence in all things.
Be safe, be kind, and be loved.
Before we go, we would like to present you with a tip or trick or witchy hint. Just something to make your day go better, because we live in a mixture of the magical and the mundane.
Today's tip, trick, or witchy hint is taking care of you. Sounds like kind of a mundane thing to say, and maybe it is, but we on the path fully believe that if your body, mind, and spirit aren't in the right place, how are you going to enjoy your ritual and magic and have success at your magic besides? So, if I sound like your mother or your grandmother, I'm not going to apologize. Personally, I am taking care of rehabbing from a broken shoulder and upper left arm. So my patience and tolerance may not come through as much as I'd like it to in the morning, because regardless of what I do, if I move wrong, things hurt. Okay, with that being said, taking care of your body. As an older person who's responsible for a lot of different things with grandchildren, here you go. When was the last time you had your annual physical? If you're a woman of that age, when was the last time you had a mammogram? If you're a guy, did you have a prostate exam this year or last year or sooner rather than later? Maintenance and prevention is a lot better than trying to fix problems later on. If you're on medication for something, for example, high blood pressure, like I am, are you making sure you take your medications regularly? Are you adding a vitamin in the mix if you really feel called to do so? I mean, just eating better, making healthier choices, at least some of the time, is always a positive thing. And as we've talked about, I'm sure somewhere along the line, are you hydrated correctly? Are you drinking enough water just to feel better? Are you getting enough sleep? as a society, because we're so hooked into our electronics and everything else, we seem to lose track of time and discover that we've been on whatever social media, what this seems to be the order of the day, way later than we should be, or we're trying to get stuff done that we didn't have time to do because we were running around all day long or whatever. I can say this because I'm kind of trapped right now because I can't drive. And a big part of my time was spent running hither and thither and yon behind all these grandchildren. And I can't do that right now. And I am discovering how I have never been getting enough sleep. And while I do not claim to have become perfect and fixed all that, I'm at least working on it because I'm aware. So look at yourself and see what you need to do for you today to take care of your body in the most effective way. Mentally, I'm not going to focus on too much. If you need to find somebody to go talk to, and you know who you are, make that appointment if it needs to be professional, or just call a friend for coffee who you can successfully vent to for a while. We all have those times where we just need to dump our crap. And if we have somebody who's willing to at least semi-listen to us once we're rid of it, we think a little more clearly. You know, mentally read something new today. Stretch your mind a little bit. Our mind needs exercise just as much as our physical does, they keep telling us. You know, and just think a little bit today about what you want to do and why. Spiritually, I'm going to tell you to have fun with your magic today and just do something magical because you want to. You know, if you want to run through our previous episodes and find one of our quick spells that you might want to try out, or write your own, go ahead. You know, knock your socks off. I mean, for me, I'm just going outside in a few minutes with a coat on because it's 30-something here in upstate New York this morning, and it's windy. And let the air blow through me for a minute or two, or maybe longer, and get a little bit of mental clarity. I'm going to call to the element of air to assist me in that, because I find that when I have clarity of mind, I feel more spiritual. I feel more connected to the world around me. And a big part of that is not taking on other people's stuff sometimes. You know, it seems to interfere with what I want to do. So with that being said, take a few minutes today and figure out how you can take care of you. And once you've figured it out, go do it. And if you're one of these people who needs permission, because I'm one of those generational caretakers and it's like kind of a natural caretaker on top of it, I'm going to give you the permission you need. So go take care of yourself, please. Until next time, may you find mirth and reverence in all things.
Well, it looks like the coffee cups are empty for this week. We hope you join us again next Tuesday. But you can find us at our website, 2youngcrones.com. That's the number 2, Young Crones.
We'd love to have you join our growing online Discord community. Check out our new Patreon presence. Just look for Young Crones Cafe. Through Patreon, you'll be able to make it to our Discord. We are also Young Crones Cafe on Twitter and Facebook.
Until then, remember, we are witches who work with energies to effect change.
We are believers in both immanent and transcendent divine.
We are celebrants of the passage of the solar and lunar cycles.
We are hedge walkers who pass back and forth between the worlds of the magical and the mundane.
We are seekers of knowledge.
And we are walkers of a spiritual tradition we call the Path.
So mote it be.
So mote it be.